Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you from the Podvlog studio in St. George, Utah, and produced by Markel Consulting, LLC. I'm your host, Dave Markel. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is episode 19, and I just want to open this episode with saying that one of the best parts of hosting a podcast such as this one, with the platform of hearing from survivors of rape and sexual assault, is the honor of having amazing guests on the show, not only to tell of their traumatic experience, but also of their survival and daily recovery from the effects of their tragedy and trauma. And every guest I've had on this show has contributed in very significant ways to helping bring justice to victims and survivors of rape, sexual assault, and interpersonal violence. Today's guest is no exception. Caroline Markel Hammond is truly a remarkable individual whose accomplishments and insights I'm grateful to have her talk to you about. Please take the time to read the episode notes to learn of just a few of Caroline's incredible accomplishments. Whether this is the first time you've listened to the SAS podcast or you're a regular listener, you are in for a fantastic episode, which I hope you'll share with family and friends, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. Thank you for tuning in. Here's Caroline. Caroline Markel Hammond, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you with me today.
I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate your patience with allowing me to coordinate our schedules. I know it took a while, but I appreciate that investment in me and the investment we're making today.
Well, it was well worth the wait for me. I can tell you that, because the fact that we're sitting here and talking together is going to make a huge impact to my audience and hopefully to yours, because I think we have so much in common in terms of what our goals are and what our mission is. So it's just a great connection. So thank you again.
I agree. Thank you. And the fact that we don't think that we're related, but we have the same last name is, I think, an undercurrent that brings comfort, but also brings a familiarity that is easy to have a conversation with you. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I know your dad's name was Ron. My dad's name was Lynn. But one of the things in common, besides my dad coming from the Illinois area and your father's family coming from that area, is that my dad was also a member of Rotary.
Oh, I love that.
So
I tell you, Rotarians have a special place in my heart. I went to a lot of meetings with my dad growing up. It's just that connection of people really designed to network with each other, but have a positive impact on the world. It's pretty amazing.
It's a great organization. Caroline, I think as a way of introduction, tell us about yourself. Give us some background and where you're at today.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Caroline Markel Hammond, and I am the founder and CEO of an organization called safeinharmsway.org. I'm also the founder and CEO of an organization called Epizon Strategy Solutions, Epizon being the Greek word for survivor. So what I do with both of those organizations, on the Safe in Harm's Way side, we have built an online community for people who are navigating domestic violence. In fact, we're a little sneaky about it, because what we talk about is the feelings. We talk about the sadness, the worry, the lies, the fear, the screaming, and the pain of a toxic relationship. We talk about feelings because even though I lived with violence in a relationship for almost 8 years, and I was having all of those feelings, I never would have raised my hand as being abused. So we want to make sure that what we can bring is an online community. We call them the 2 a.m. moments, those moments when it's happened again, when you have locked yourself in the bathroom to keep safe, when you are crying, when you have your back to the door and your feet against the sink, hoping that can't break in, and you're left wondering, how is this happening again? That safeinharmsway.org has resources that you can log on at your next safe chance and start to discover survivor stories, start to discover our healing modalities so that you can make next steps to heal yourself and to find solutions before that love bombing cycle starts again. Because if we don't reach people at that 2 a.m. moment, or maybe it's a 2:35 p.m. in the afternoon moment where things have gotten so bad again, and there's not an immediate step to take, people will stay in that relationship. It's just what happens. And on the Epizon side of solutions, what I do is I take everything we do for survivors and I bring that to the workplace, because employers employ 60 to 70% of their population is experiencing domestic violence or has experienced domestic violence. And since domestic violence is the number one way that women are killed at work, when an abuser shows up to kill a woman at work, he takes out additional 20% of her coworkers, and by takes out, I mean kills them. So it truly is not only a safety problem for employers, but a $3.6 trillion economic problem for employers. So we take all of our services, broaden it, and work with organizations to develop their safety plans and to develop their protocols on how to keep everyone safe when domestic violence is so prevalent a component of society.
All of that so resonates with me because as a former law enforcement investigator specializing in domestic violence and sexual assault issues, the aspects that you're talking about, those little idiosyncrasies with regard to talking about feelings on the safe and harm's way end of things, I appreciate that. And I'm glad you emphasize that, because I think in most people's minds, the concept of domestic violence is a drunk guy coming home and beating his wife, or coming home from work and dinner not being ready, or dinner being ready but cold, or whatever these triggers or activators are for the violence to start. Most people think that that's what it is, but there is so much more. And that list of feelings that you talked about is a huge part of the domestic violence dynamic and very, very rarely addressed. So I want to go there as our discussion evolves, but I also am super impressed with the whole idea of Epizon. From that perspective, I think a lot of people are totally unaware of the impact of domestic violence on the workplace and how people are less productive because they're coming to work scared and damaged and hurt and in pain, not only emotionally, but sometimes physically, oftentimes physically. And that, yes, they are highly vulnerable at work for those reasons that you've already brought up. They're a target, as are their colleagues. So what you're doing with your two-pronged approach to awareness and solutions and survivorhood is awfully impressive. I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss it. I also want to add, as we get started, that most of the stories I tell, because they are my own, I use the female pronouns. I'm a girl. I identify as a girl. But I need to acknowledge that violence affects men, violence affects women, violence affects people who are a little bit more gender neutral or fluid. And so I don't want anybody to miss this message because of the pronouns that I use. I want to be able to have people understand those dynamics and know that because it's my story, I use those pronouns. One of the things we also recognize with safeandharmsway.org and Epizon Strategy Solutions, we have unique services, unique offerings for all the different people and how they identify and what demographic they belong to, because abuse impacts them differently. So those are some of the nuances when you talk about both entities that also makes us different, is that we're not just focused on one type of person. We're going to make sure anyone experiencing violence has the opportunity to find the help that they need.
Great. I love that. And I'm glad you brought that up. Let's go there. The idea of sexual assault within the domestic violence situation. And tell me what your thoughts are about those connections.
You have to peel back the layers when you're talking with people, because you don't get to the sexual component of what's been experienced until you peel back all the other layers of what people are experiencing. It takes patience, and that takes understanding. Whether you're a frontline responder or an advocate or an emergency room nurse or a physician, and you're having a conversation with someone who has shown up yet again, because it takes people a long time to leave, taking your time to start by believing what you're being told as the truth, because sometimes what you're being told is so egregious that it's easy to say, no way, you're making all that up. And when you treat a survivor like that, you have just sentenced them to longer years, possibly decades, with the person who's issuing abuse, because they haven't even begun to crack all of what they've experienced. In my experience with working with people, 90% of the folks have had some form of sexual assault or sexual abuse. It could be anything from full-on rape within a marriage, Some people think that's not possible. No, it is. Within a
Yeah.
marriage, within a romantic relationship, it could be something as simple as, and this is huge, and people don't identify it as such, sexual coercion or not being honest with your sexuality. So if I'm choosing to engage with someone and they present themselves to be a monogamous heterosexual, and meanwhile they're having unprotected gay sex with any stranger they meet on the internet, and then they come home to you and have sex with you without your knowledge, without your consent, that is a form of sexual abuse. You are making choices with your body that are in complete alliance with someone who is lying to you. That is a form of sexual assault.
It is.
Multiple affairs, and then coming home to the person at home that they are looking in the eye and claiming to love is a form of sexual abuse. You are being put in harm's way with the very act of being intimate with someone who claims to love you, but is a serial cheater or is not monogamous in any way and is not heterosexual. So these are things in a heterosexual relationship. If they're having sex with, if they're men and having sex with other men, or women and having sex with other women, that's all a form of sexual abuse, and people don't identify as that. And when you tell them that, the light bulb of despair and recognition, and it's an ugly look, comes across their face
Mm.
because they've lived with multiple cheating episodes for years. They've been promised that's going to change, and it doesn't. And so they don't realize that that is definitely a component of sexual abuse within the overall circle of domestic violence. It happens all of the time.
Absolutely. Which leads me to ask you this, because I know you're talking right now from a very personal, experiential basis.
Mhm.
So, what are you able to tell us about your experience?
I had a networking meeting this morning, and the gentleman I was with asked me, how how can you talk about what has happened to you, and how do you do it without crying? And what I want to emphasize right now, that I can have these conversations because I do a ton of therapy. It will be in March, 7 years since I escaped. I still go to therapy. There are therapy in the Kansas City area. There's this great organization called Moxa, which solely works with sexual assault survivors, their families, their kids, for free, because they know that sexual assault impacts every relationship that survivor experiences. So even if you do a quick Google search on sexual assault services, there are places like that all across this country that specialize, and in most cases that therapy is completely free. So I do that kind of healing. I meditate, I do Reiki healing, I have an energy healer, I have a chiropractor, I have every form of healing because it takes that. But most of all, I am determined that that person will not steal my sexuality from me, because so often when people don't do that healing, they never want to again experience what could be the joyful act of having sex. And I was determined that that person would not take that from me and not steal that from me. And so what I also do, so for example, when I do a podcast like this, Dave, what I do is I take time afterwards and I sever the cords from putting myself back into that place.
Yeah.
And I have little rituals that I'll do. I'll take an hour where I will drink water and I will meditate, because I want people to know these things so that if they're having a bad day, or if they have a hard time talking about what happened to them in the form of a sexual assault, that they're not doing it wrong if it hurts to talk about. And they're not doing it wrong if you can have 21 great days in a row and maybe 4 days where you have to be in bed by 5 o'clock. Your healing journey is yours to own. It takes time. But most of all, I want to raise my hand today on this podcast and say, when you do the hard work, life is so much better in the after, but you have to do that work. So I'll switch after I'll step down off my soapbox.
That's
And
a great soapbox, by the way.
in Safe in Harm's Way this year, we're doing a whole trek across the country. We're working with a sex coach and a trauma certified sex coach. And we're going to go across the country talking about this because we'll talk about a few dynamics of what it also means in that kind of sexual abuse for people to have awareness and people to know they're not alone. The story I'm about to tell of my experience can also be found in a great podcast webinar that was done by domesticshelters.org November 11th of 2021. That webinar focused on this particular type of abuse that I experienced. So about 4 weeks before my planned and paid for wedding, I was getting ready to climb into bed. We had been out with friends at a wine tasting, and he said, "Sweet pea, I think I've done something that's going to make you mad." And I said, "Well, what have you done?" He popped open his computer and he proceeded to show me an email exchange he had started without my knowledge, without my consent, with strangers on Craigslist. Now, this was back in 2016 when Craigslist and Ashley Madison were at their height of people using them to establish ways to cheat on their partner. And what he had done is given them my picture, had told them where I worked, told them where my kids went to school. I did not share kids with them, and offered me up to have sex with them without my knowledge, without my consent. And so I said, "Oh, my dear, I'm not mad. I am livid. Get out of my house. How dare you? You don't even know if these people are who they say they are. What the heck? What is, I mean, I won't curse, but it was expletive filled." And you know what he said, Dave? He said what abusers usually say when someone reacts negatively in the face of insanity. He turned it around immediately and said, "Oh, sure. Now we're going to have to talk about your feelings all night, right, Carolyn? We're going to have to talk about this because you're upset. I knew you'd be upset. How dare you be upset? How dare you be upset?" And abusers do that. They turn it around quickly like a dime and start blaming you for the reaction you're having when actually your reaction to their insanity is appropriate. What usually happens is the person on the receiving end of that, me, I would have normally gone into defensive mode. Well, you can't blame me for like this, defending my reaction. And I don't know. The kids and I wonder if it was our dog in heaven or my grandma, my dad's mom. But there's this little voice on my ear that says, "Shush, shush, 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 be quiet. Just be quiet." And so I did. I said, "No, we don't have to talk about this at all." And I climbed in bed. And as soon as he fell asleep, I took his computer. And when I opened up his computer, what I found was so horrific and so disgusting that I thought it must be horrible spam. I shut his computer and went back to bed, started to go back to bed. And that same voice, that same like, go take a look there. Go take a look there. And I popped open his computer. And what I discovered is that he belonged to an organization that taught men how to drug and incapacitate their wives or their girlfriends, invite people over, and watch while they raped her. And I sat looking at that group and thought, well, someone must have sent this to him by mistake. I mean, your brain goes into a million other directions to somehow explain what is so horrific that you are seeing. And that was not the case. What I discovered is that for outside of 8 weeks of our relationship, for almost 8 years, he had been putting me out on the internet to have sex with other people. He had been posting my pictures. He would tell me, "Sweet pea, you've been traveling so much. Get dressed up. I'm gonna take you out. We're gonna have a great steak dinner. I'm taking you to your favorite steak place. Look beautiful. We're going out." And meanwhile, he would have stationed 4 to 5 men around the restaurant so that they could check me out. His emails to people started out with, "My girlfriend has no idea I'm doing this to her," and ended with, I will facilitate what could be done to her. I noticed that there were nights I could not remember that I was a party at places and with people that I had no knowledge that I was there. So I was immediately taken back. I was scared. I also discovered all his numerous affairs with both men and women. I discovered that he had people to our home when I traveled in our bed, strangers, to have sex. And one of the dots I'd like to pause and connect there is when strangers come to your home to have sex, they see your family pictures. They see the pile of bills on your counter. They remember the address. They know where your kids go to school. If there's tuition there, they know everything about you from being in your home. And he did this in his first marriage, and he did this with me. So the amount of danger that he put all of us in with his sexual activity was egregious. What I discovered about me, because at the time, my brain is spinning. I'm trying to process what all this is. I'm trying to see if I can remember anything. I don't know how to work a Mac, and he had a Mac. So I'm trying to take pictures and scrolling through and trying to then remember to go back and mark that email as unread in case he would somehow know. Running to the bathroom to vomit, crying, fearful that he's going to come out and find me with his computer. So I gathered enough evidence of what I thought might be good, put his computer back, went to bed. So then I started to thinking, and this happened within my healing process, because your brain at that point goes into freeze. And let me pause here and say, before I talk about brain freeze, let me see if you have any questions so far about what I said.
I don't, but I know our audience probably has tons. I think what I want you to do is just continue, because
Okay.
it's so enlightening for so many of my audience that aren't aware of these layers upon layers upon layers of dynamics of domestic violence and sexual abuse, that I think it's enlightening, and that they're gaining information and education from what you're saying. So I've compiled the list of questions in my mind and some areas that I do want to talk about, but I'm just going to have you continue on if you're okay with that.
I am. I'll start with one of the first questions I get. If you were being sexually assaulted, how did he do it? Our normal routine, if I wasn't traveling, was to come home. We would have sex, we would have dinner, we would have sex, and then he'd bring me a glass of wine. I now don't know what was in that wine. Our bedroom had a separate entrance on the back of our house. It was dark back there. You had to walk around the house. It was a separate entrance off the back patio. So people could access our bedroom easily from the back part of the house and not be seen. The other thing is, how would you not know with your body? Like, because if we're talking about sexual assault, there would be some kind of evidence. We would have had sex. So if I'd woken up the next morning knowing we'd had sex, and you can tell with your body, most times when you've had sex, I wouldn't have thought anything about that because we had had sex the night before. And if I couldn't remember anything during the night because I'm sleeping, it wouldn't have been uncommon for me to know that we had had sex. I can look back now, and I know that with my body, there were things going on all those 8 years. There would be times, and I'm going to say trigger warning here because we're going to get nitty gritty about female anatomy. There were times when I felt really raw. I had constant yeast infections. In all those experiences of constant yeast infections, my vagina being particularly red in the mornings or the next day, never in a million years would I have thought, you know what, I bet he's drugging me and allowing other people to rape me at night. Never in a million years. I did a podcast once with a therapist, and she said, in fact, Caroline, had you come to somebody and said, these things are happening, I think he's drugging me and allowing people to rape me, they would have probably diagnosed you as delusional and put you in a 3-day hold in the psych ward. That is what this webinar, and I want to refer people to this webinar again from domesticshelters.org, November 11th of 2021. It talks with experts across the country about this particular type of abuse. And sometimes it's because you think you see somebody put something in your drink, but you're like, oh, I just must have not seen that. or I
Right.
must have misinterpreted that. Or you wake up the next morning and can't remember anything. Or you have bleeding from your vagina or bleeding from your rectum and you think something's wrong with you, but you can't remember what would have happened to make that happen. The surest way that experts will talk about for the little light bulb moments for people who've experienced that is when you stop the relationship, those things stop. I haven't had a yeast infection since I escaped in 2016. I haven't had a raw and red vagina. Even having relationships and sex in the past 7 years since 2016. So whatever was happening with my body, my brain either can't remember or it's stored there. There's lots of theories. It's probably stored someplace in my brain. The smart people I work with for therapy, statistically, false memories through hypnosis are about 75%. So even if you would go under hypnosis and try to pull out those memories, 75% of them they deem to be false. So I'll never know what truly happened to me. And I'm fine with that. My brain is functioning. I still, because of all the therapy, I still love having sex. It's one of my favorite things to do with the right person, with consent involved. But I know that if I tried to dig really deep, that what I come up with, I still then couldn't classify as real. So I don't go there. Some people it manifests differently. Some people have nightmares. Some people have these episodes. Some people can't shake the feeling. That's again, do Google searches for sexual assault trauma and therapy with your zip code or your city. There's amazing people who do this work and will believe you when you go to them. You can also reference that webinar and bring it to them and say, no, see, this is a thing. Every podcast I do, every one of them, I get messages from people and saying, oh, thank God. I thought I was crazy. Oh my
Right.
God. So much makes sense to me now. And that's hard to hear. And it's
Yeah.
hard for them to realize. But knowing that legitimizes the person so that they know they're not crazy. So they have the opportunity to heal and get help. And that's a huge, huge opportunity for folks to heal and live the rest of their life continuing to heal and finding a way for whatever thereafter looks like to be better because of that healing.
Absolutely. That's why this podcast exists. It's not just to give a platform and a voice to victims, it's to give an education to those who may not be aware that this stuff is so prevalent, that it's happening everywhere in our society, again, across all socioeconomic boundaries or lines, whatever you want to call it, across all cultures, in multiple genders. It's just there.
It is.
And we need to be aware of it. We need to be more educated about it. And we need, as you said, to start by believing and helping those who are victims and survivors to obtain their justice. You have been through so much, Caroline, in terms of that aspect of domestic violence, the sexual abuse, the rapes. And many people would think because you were unconscious that it wouldn't impact you. And I want you, if you don't mind, I know you are trauma informed. You're a trauma informed coach
Mm-hmm.
now since May of last year, I believe
Exactly.
is what
Yep.
I saw.
Yeah.
I'd like for you, if you would, talk about that aspect of trauma, even though you were unconscious. Talk, if you would, about the trauma that you experienced.
Those moments, and I wish I could say it was a one and done. I wish I could say, oh, all of these little epiphanies happened once. I could process it once. We were done. It didn't happen again. It doesn't. The beauty of your brain when you are navigating something of trauma, and I do call it a beauty because your brain is just this amazing, incredible organ. And its sole focus is to make sure you breathe and you stay alive. Any other piece of information goes out the window. So when I was healing between the visits to police officers, to visits to the FBI, to doctors, to lawyers, to judges, to courtrooms, I had to write my name on a yellow Post-it note because I couldn't remember who I was. I could not oftentimes even remember my address. I remember I was standing in front of at my doctor's office at the counter, and she said, "What's your name?" And I didn't know. And I didn't know how to say, I didn't know. So I just fumbled through my purse for my driver's license and I handed it to her and I said, "Here's who I am." So For people who are experiencing that kind of trauma, very forgetful of everything. For those experiencing that type of trauma, recognizing it and knowing that that's your brain keeping you alive helps you to also know you're not crazy, because your brain is just doing beautiful work. So I would often exhale and say, okay, thank you, my brain, for protecting me right now. I would pull over off the side of the road if I was driving because my heart was beating so fast and I couldn't breathe. And I would get out of my car and literally take 2 steps forward and 1 step back to remind me that I had progress, even if I took a step back. I started writing everything down. And that's actually how safeandharmsway.org was born. I started writing everything down. I started writing a list of all the people helping me, and I started writing a list of all the people who weren't helpful to me. And I started writing stories about what happened. And above all else, and this is going to, but I have heard it time and again, and people might dismiss it. I often say it is as easy and as hard as it sounds. Gratitude. Gratitude. I would be thankful for every single thing. I'm so thankful I'm alive. I am so thankful that it takes me 32 steps to walk from my car to my new safe place to live. I am so thankful that I can see. I am so thankful that I can taste great food. I am so thankful that my key worked in the door. I mean, everything I could find gratitude for, I did. And the reverse, I'd like to say to friends and family, because a lot of our work now at safeandharmsway.org is taking on friends, family, and coworkers, because people can do all that healing. But if they aren't supported by friends, family, and coworkers, that takes longer. So if you are a friend, family, work with someone who's experienced this, then you have the biggest amount of patience when they're not dressed at 3 p.m. You have the biggest amount of patience when they can't remember something. Well, wait, I told you we're meeting at 5 o'clock on Friday. Nope. You know what? Let's talk about it. We're going to meet at 5 o'clock on Friday. Shaming someone for not remembering doesn't make it better. It just makes them feel worse.
Yeah.
Offering them very specific compliments and gratitude back to them. I need people to mirror back to me who I am. So friends would send me memes. Friends would send me songs. They'd say, oh my gosh, I found this song and I thought you'd love it, and send me the YouTube link. They would write to me, you know what, I remember this time in high school when we did a play together and you told the best joke and everybody started cracking up. I laughed so hard I wet my pants, Caroline. It was insane. Very specific things about the person you love to bring them back to themselves consistently, even if they don't respond, over and over again, even if they don't respond. Every time I had to go to court, I received so many Beyonce memes from my daughter that I actually walked out of the courtroom thinking I was a strong, multi-billionaire rock goddess married to Jay-Z. Only I'd get to my car and I'd think, well, I'd look at my hands and oh no, I'm just a skinny little white girl. You have to fuel people with every modality that you can think of, and consistently, without the expectation of anything in return. And as a friend or a family or a coworker, if you notice something about someone, reach out to them. The number of emails and text messages and Facebook messages I got from people as far back as when I was 5 years old saying,
Wow.
I see that your Facebook looks different and there's somebody missing. Just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. Just want to let you know that if you ever want to talk, I'm a safe space. I wouldn't maybe respond to them. They'd send me another message. Just want to let you know I was sitting in the sun today and I thought of you. I'm sending you those sunny vibes. Just want to let you know I'm thinking about you today and I'm remembering this about what we did in Mrs. Nifong's class. Follow your gut. If your gut is telling you that something could be wrong with another person, you don't have to solve their problems. You don't have to offer solutions. You just have to show up and say, I'm here to sit with you, even if we don't talk.
Right.
I'm here to be with you.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't want to do anything. The number of times my friends came over to pick me up while I was still in my pajamas and had been for 3 days to go sit on their porch in the sun and just say, I'm coming to get you. I'll come up to your house. I'll come up to your door. I'll take your hand. I'm going to drive you back to my house. We're just going to sit on the porch in the sun. That's all they had to do. That's all you have to do to someone who's experienced this, because the trauma of processing all that information was overwhelming at times. It's still days. Like I had a really bad day on Monday, and my daughter and I have a joke that I am currently Caroline 6.25B Then every time I have another moment of healing, now, like after Monday, I was Caroline 6.25C. So we moved up. Having those kinds of conversations and allowing that healing to happen and knowing that it might take years, when you are surrounded by love, you're okay to live in that healing space. You can still have the bad days. Again, you're not doing it wrong. But being trauma informed is to start by believing and just sit with the people. Just sit and listen, or just sit and be quiet and just love on them.
I think there's a misconception out there that if you've been through a lot of trauma, you are therefore trauma informed. And we're talking about two different things: a person who's experienced trauma and a person who understands what that trauma does to the brain and to the body are two different things.
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative to be able to talk to somebody who has both experienced. I'm not appreciative of the fact that you experienced trauma, but I'm appreciative of the fact that since you did experience trauma and that you then became trauma informed through the education process that you went through, that's what I'm appreciative of. And if you don't mind, I would love for you to talk a little bit to that point, what it means to you to be trauma informed.
There are a lot of classes you can take that are all online. The course that I went through was relatively inexpensive for 6 weeks of group work. I think it was around about $400, maybe a little bit more. But I knew it would help me in the work I do as much as also heal me. One of the biggest takeaways I took, that if you think that gratitude and meditation and breathing are just ridiculous, gonna raise my hand, you are wrong. That's part of being trauma informed. It's retraining your body. It's coming back down into your body so that you can actually live with yourself and you can start to heal better. So those things are really part of being trauma informed as someone who's experienced trauma, and for friends, family, and coworkers to be able to understand that they can offer that as well. The next biggest thing is to ask before you deliver any opinion. If someone shares something with you, what I ask people now is, help me understand. I can just be a friend here and listen, or I can offer you perspective, or I can offer you an opinion. How can I best show up for you right now? And I know from working with people and testing this on 51,000 humans, there's a fear in stepping forward to assist someone because you don't want to say the wrong thing. And I get that. But if you choose to just say, I am a safe place, there is nothing you can say that will make me care for you, love you, or think any less of you. And always ask the question, tell me what you need from me right now. Is it just to listen, or would you like me to help you find solutions? Is it just to listen, or would you like me to offer an opinion? Is it just to listen, or is it to take you to some place and get you some additional help? Asking those questions gives back power and control to a person to which it has all been stripped away.
Yeah.
Domestic violence strips it away. Sexual assault is the worst way to take power and control and someone's voice from them. So to be able to give it back by asking those questions is vital. That goes for advocates. That goes for police officers. That goes for lawyers. I wrote lawyers with going for restraining orders. Hey, here's what I've discovered about this kind of person. Here's what we need to know when we're talking to them. Here's how I'm processing information. Here's what I need you to know about me. I wrote all of that out for the lawyers who were helping me navigate the restraining order so that they had an understanding. And what I also did, as far as being trauma informed for myself, and I know this through the classes I've taken, is to really be specific with people. I now teach that same method to survivors. And it starts with, I am so very scared right now, and I need you to know the first two things that I am afraid about. And then you tell the two things. What's your opinion on those two things, and how can I get help? Thank you for telling me your opinion on those two things. I'm going to be doing that. Is there anybody else you think I should talk to? You're constantly saying thank you. Saying thank you, part of that gratitude thing. Saying to somebody, who else can I talk to? You're going to develop another connection. And then you repeat that step with the person. And you say to that new person you've been connected to, my name is Carolyn. I am really afraid right now, and I could use your help. These are the two things I'm most afraid of that I need to get solved. What do you think? Thank you. Thank you for helping me. I really appreciate it. Who do you think I should talk to next? And keep talking. If you run across someone who doesn't believe you or demeans you, you don't stop talking. That means people can't see me. I'm holding up my middle finger. You don't get to hang out with me and you don't deserve my story, but I'm going to find somebody else who does. Do not stop talking. If you run across somebody who is not trauma informed or who doesn't know how to process that, that's all about them. It's not about you. So keep talking until you get in front of the right people. I am here to say it may take talking to multiple people, but there are people ready and willing to help. And you just have to keep talking about it. And I know that's hard because it's reliving it. But if you just pick out 2 things that you need right help, your body and your brain can handle 2 things. And you just solve things 2 at a time.
Absolutely amazing that you are able to articulate all of this in ways that resonate and speak to the listeners of this podcast. But I also know many of my listeners are stuck in that place where they want to be a survivor. They want to be more informed. They want to know what's going on in their heads, but they don't feel like they have the personality, the inner fortitude, the motivation. Are you able to talk to us about where that came from inside of you? What started that?
Wow, I love that question. I wish I could say that I had some kind of magic that I could say, you know what? I said abracadabra and boom, I was there. It's not how it went. I do know this. I have traveled the world helping people who have experienced domestic violence and sexual assault, the world. And to the person, every survivor I come across is fiercely intelligent, highly empathetic. They do not quit and they always win. It is those dynamics that keep them invested in a relationship, knowing, you know what, I'm smart enough. I fix everything. I keep a house. I've gotten good grades, or I didn't get good grades, but you know what? I still passed school. I still did these things. I played soccer. I played softball. I did these things. Those things, as part of a winning team, or as part of a winning place at work, or as part of a good group of friends, are the exact thing that an abuser wants to tear down and decimate. And so you have been dismantled from the inside out by the very things that make you who you are. You just have to remember who you are. And that is, again, as I say, as easy and as hard as it sounds. But if people know, even if they're feeling like I can't get out of this and I can't get past it, breathe, look inside. Remember all the times you won something. And by won, I don't mean the race. I mean, you created a friendship that still is intact. You were on a winning team that played soccer. You were the person who stuck up when someone was being bullied. You're the person that when you watch a TV show and the dogs are on there and Sarah is singing the sad song, your heart is broken for those dogs. That's empathy. You are intelligent because you have figured out a way to remain alive in the face of chaos. That took intelligence. And when you remember that those things that put you in a position to stay with someone who looked you in the eye, claimed to love you, and in no way deserved you, you can start to take those things and rebuild your life. And you can start to take those things and take 1 tiny step forward or 2 tiny steps forward on the side of the highway and 1 back. And you can start to rebuild your life. It doesn't have to be all at once. It just has to be piece by piece. What I counsel people to do is surround yourself with the things you love. What's your favorite color? Do you not have money and you're worried about how you're going to pay the bills? Go outside and go to your local animal shelter and walk the dogs. It's free. You don't have to pay money to do it. It rewires your brain because you are investing in another thing to make their life better. That fuels you. Walk, sit in the sun, take off your shoes and ground your feet to the earth. That regulates your nervous system. Do things where you can visualize outcomes. So for me, the thing I use most often, I would imagine that all the filth, all the ugliness inside of me that was left from being in this relationship, that it was seeping, starting at my head, and I would visualize whatever my favorite color was that day, that filth taking on that color and starting at the top of my head, going down, filling my ears, filling my throat. That filth was moving down my body. I would imagine it going over my breast. I would imagine it going down my sides. I would imagine it hanging out in my middle section, hanging out around my vagina, hanging out to really soak up all that disgust that I had experienced down my legs, down my feet, and leaving my body. And I would imagine that color that was now all filled with the shit that had been inside of me, or because of experiencing what I experienced. And I would see it in my brain, and I would imagine it floating across the United States and landing in Napa and fertilizing all that bullshit, fertilizing the best grapes for the best wine. I did that 2 or 3 times a day. That was for me ridding myself of my body of that. That might look different, that visualization, that cognitive behavioral therapy, leaving, that might look different to somebody else. But that's what it did to me. And a beautiful moment was one of my very, very dear friends. We went to a trip in Temecula, California. We stayed in a vineyard, and our room overlooked all the grapes. It's about 11 o'clock at night. And she knew that that's what I did. And she said, "My God, Carolyn, look at what you made. Look at all that down there. It's beautiful.
Wow.
You want to run out and go lay in what you made? Because those grapes look amazing." So we ran out in our pajamas and we rolled around on the ground in all the grapes I had made with all that bullshit, just laughed until the people who ran the winery came out. They're like, "Are you girls okay?" And my girlfriend said, "She made all this. She made all this." Those kinds of things that bring you back into your body and allow you to visually remove it. And if you're listening to this and you think that is completely ridiculous, I'm here to say it is not. It's actually a form of therapy. It's actually
Absolutely.
honoring the trauma in your body and getting rid of it. So does working out. So does sweating.
Yeah.
So does taking a hot shower, letting that all out. So is taking a cold shower. So is taking a bath. I would take a bath and imagine as the water left the tub, it was taking everything with it. The next big thing I would say, if you feel alone in your journey and you feel like you're too much and you feel like what has happened to me has not happened to anybody else in this world, I'm here to say you are not alone. That's one of the things we do at safeandharmsway.org is tell stories so that people know they're not alone. I was making 6 figures, high 6 figures. I have 2 master's degrees. The person I escaped from is a senior vice president of a major corporation. Everybody kept saying, "You, this happened to you? You were not alone." And there are people out there who've experienced and need to hear your story so that they can find their way back to health and healing. And they can find their pathway to ask those 3 questions to people you talk to, and then talk to the next person and ask again to get the help and the services that you need.
I'm so glad my audience gets to hear this. And my gratitude for right now is you being on this show. It's been amazing. And there's so much more we could talk about because we are so in tune with what our mission is, as I mentioned before, and what our goals are. I would love to have you back again if your busy schedule allows it, because there's a lot of areas that we haven't touched on that I want to. One of the things, if I could take just a few more minutes before we close this out, is what is your message to first responders and investigators who handle domestic violence and sexual assault cases?
To start by believing, to understand that when somebody is faced in trauma, it is an automatic response of either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fight would be they're going to fight back. If that's the case, then you need to understand who has the power and the control in the relationship. And I'll use the female and the male pronoun. If the woman is losing her mind, she's not the aggressor. She's having an appropriate response to what that person just did. If there is somebody calm and cool, collected, going, "Look how crazy she is," he holds all the power. If it's freeze and your body automatically chose that. So if you beat yourself up and say, "Oh my God, I did nothing," your body chose that for you. Your body, your brain, in all its beauty and glory was saying, the way we say alive right now is to do nothing.
And that's the number one response of our brain
Right.
in survival mode, is to freeze.
Yes.
Especially in sex assault situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very grateful that you brought that up.
Right. Flight is, of course, you're going to try, you're going to run, you're trying to get away. That can also happen in a normal relationship because your body's going, "Something about this seems familiar. I'm out." That happens at the time of incident. It happens as you heal. Fawn is more, I could not describe to you the person's face, even though I knew what he looked like, but I could tell you every intimate detail about the plant across the room. You hyper focus on something outside of what is happening to you. Those are real. And I would think that so many first responders are aware of that, but they are not. And so because that shows up differently than how somebody else experienced it, than what you think, doesn't mean they're lying. And that's the other thing. If you are expecting someone to react in a way that you think you would react, and I'm going to say this not only to first responders, but I'm going to say it to survivors, do never demean another person's story by saying, "I experienced sexual assault and I didn't do that." No, you didn't. Your body reacted differently. And how dare you? That really makes me angry. How dare you?
Yep.
Don't judge somebody on what you think you would have done or because you faced the same thing and you did it differently. The other thing is, I know that first responders do not have all the answers. So say that. I don't have all the answers, but I'll help you find them. The best experience I've had with first responders, police, detectives is they start by believing and they say, I don't know all the answers, but I know these things. I'll help you find the next person. I'll help you get in touch with the next person, get them to the next resource and follow up. Did you talk with them? Do you need help? And I know everybody's busy and I know everybody has a caseload, but a 5-minute phone call or text message of, are you okay? Did you get what you needed? Ginormous in the outcome and positive impact on another human. And those things are what I wish to the person that first responders gave, because asking someone, well, if he's so horrible, why don't you just leave? Statistically, there's a 75% chance that person's going to be killed in the first 3 months of them leaving.
That's
if there's a gun in the home, it's a 500% increased chance somebody's going to be killed when they're leaving. So if you're a survivor and you're thinking, what have I done? I can never get past it. And you are currently not in the relationship. You are fiercely intelligent, highly empathetic. You don't quit and you want. Build on that.
Right.
Keep staying safe. One of the things we've developed at Safe in Harm's Way, and people can download 25 ways to be safe. So at Safe in Harm's Way, we've taken everything that was the healing process and made connections. So you can do joindeleteme.com and use the SAFE20 discount code, and it removes all your personal information from the internet. So when you find a safe space, he or she can't find you again. We have, if you want to have a celebration and you want to drink wine, we have a subscription wine service. If you want to start to document your evidence of abuse in a way that is court admissible, we are the proprietors or the distributors of an app called Victim's Voice that allows you to document and have it be court admissible. So there are 25 different programs and education and next steps and how to keep yourself safe. And people can download that. If you follow us on Instagram or on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, you can easily download those 25 steps. And if you are someone that's a friend, family, or coworker of someone who's experienced abuse, you can download so you know how to help that person stay safe. Because remember, if we're dealing with someone with a trauma brain, they may not be able to get through all the steps to do those things, but you can help them do it. So for friends, family, or coworkers, or for the person living it, 25 education and examples and tools to help people heal and stay safe.
Caroline, that's so in harmony with what I'm trying to get across to people. And I'm so thankful that you're willing to offer that. It's amazing that exists in that format for victims and survivors to use. So thank you.
You're welcome. I have one more tool that I like to use that I'd love to offer people if that's okay.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we did at Safe in Harm's Way is we've launched national campaigns around 2 different components. One component is all those I'm sorries, all those promised flowers, promises of changed behavior, promises of, teddy bears and, oh my gosh, sweet pea, it won't happen again. Only it does happen again. It's called thelastimsorry.com. You can go to thelastimsorry.com. You can self-identify. It's built for men. It's built for women. It's built for people of color. It acknowledges people in the queer community, people who have English as a secondary language. You can go through and pick that out in that form as well. And people who are medically compromised. The surest way to issue power and control to a diabetic is not to let them have their insulin. So all of those dynamics that those different demographics face, we've put in one tool. You take a little journey. It's a benign looking website. You can easily click out of it. It will shut down that browser for 72 hours. And when you go to bed, your abuser can't look up what you've been looking. And it gives you immediate and actionable steps you can take based on your 1 or 2 most important needs you have right now. And that is the first and only site that's ever been done to recognize every demographic. And it's called thelastimsorry.com. The next campaign we did talked about feeling small. So when someone controls you or manipulates you or degrades you in such a way that you have to quiet yourself and you're slowly shrinking as they seem to be getting bigger because they're holding the power and control. Feeling dash, not the word dash, but actually the symbol dash, small.com does the same thing. It feeds back up to the last I'm sorry into that website, and it allows people to take those. It's a different visual we used, but it allows people again to take their journey, recognize and identify as who they are, and then get the next immediate and actionable step that will help them find safety, health, and solutions. And it's live 24/7, so you can log in at any time, go back to it, take a different journey, find another resource. Safeinharmsway.org is always there, and you can find anything on that website. Again, to identify the healing, to identify the abuse you're living, to find the next solution on how to heal from that, and then to move forward by looking at survivor stories. So all those resources are part of the 25, but they also are separate in that you can pause it and look right at feeling-small.com or the lastimsorry.com or safeinharmsway.org.
Caroline, you've done an amazing job today with me in getting so much information out in a relatively short period of time. I can't thank you enough. And I do want to have you back. If there's an
I'd be
opportunity
honored.
for that to happen, that would be great.
I'd be
And
honored.
I'm definitely going to be much more active in letting people know that if Caroline Markel Hammond said it, it's accurate, it's good, it's helpful, and it's helping bring justice to victims and survivors. So thank you
Well,
very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I know the positive impact that comes from using these tools. We've been doing this for a long time. We're really good at what we do at Safe in Harm's Way and at Epizon. And to be able to help people get through the worst experiences and know that life can be so much better in the after of abuse is the light at the end of the tunnel that sometimes all you need is knowing that to make it through the day.
Absolutely. Awesome. This has been great.
Thank
Thank you, Caroline.
Dave, I appreciate you so much with having me today, and I appreciate how you show up in the world and what you do for survivors and to raise awareness. And thank you for the investment you make in people, not only in your role as an investigator when you were living that part of your life, but what you do now to drive awareness. It's incredible. And thank you.
Thanks for those kind words.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll talk again.
Sounds good. Bye.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to thank Caroline Markel Hammond for taking the time out of her busy schedule to talk to us, and encourage all of you to check out the safeinharmsway.org site, as well as the epizonsolutionstrategies.com website. Thank you for listening. I hope this episode brought you to a new level of understanding of how important it is to doing your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape, sexual assault, and domestic violence. If this episode, or this podcast in general, is helping you or someone you know learn more about being trauma-informed, or in learning about ways you can recover and be helped on your personal journey to healing and survivorship, please drop me a note and tell me about it. I'll put my email address in the episode notes. I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. R.C. Gray will be back as my guest, and we'll discuss the neuroscience and memory of trauma and some of how the trauma of rape and sexual assault affects our daily lives. You won't want to miss it. As always, please do your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors of sexual abuse, and remember that the best way to do this is to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.